I'm Michelle.
And I'm Lucy.
Welcome to a Cameo episode. These episodes of various lengths about people we may or may not have mentioned before will be slotted...
Nope, never heard of him before.
will be slotted in between other episodes and may or may not fill in gaps and enhance our understanding of the age. And sometimes they give us more gaps.
Yes.
Well, what happened? Nobody knows.
Gaps we never knew existed until we dug them up.
On the other hand, these people have to be pretty excited. They were basically nobodies in their time sometimes.
Yes.
And then they're all of a sudden, hey, we're spoken about centuries later.
Yes.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. Just because I didn't jump off a castle wall. They're doing a whole episode about me. Right, well, this man didn't jump off a castle wall.
Okay.
Because today, Bartholemew Chasseneuz.
What?
Or Chasseneuz. Chasseneuz.
Okay.
Bartholemew Chasseneuz was born in 1480, so we're quite late. We probably could have done this next season, but I'd have forgotten it by then, so we're doing it now. In Issy-l'Évêque in France.
Oh, he's not even English this time.
No. He was a jurist or lawyer. In fact, following the events of this story, he became one of the most notorious jurists or lawyers in France.
How do you become a notorious juror? Oh, dear.
Jurist. He's not on a jury. He's a jurist, a lawyer.
Okay.
The story I'm about to tell, as with most of the stories we hear on Tudoriferous, may not be as clear-cut as previously been thought.
Oh, dear.
And it's undergone many retellings which possibly fell into the trap of seeing early modern people as superstitious and credulous and not as good as us.
Okay.
Anyway, the events take place in the town of Autun, about 150 miles southeast of Paris. And it's surrounded by the wine-growing Burgundy region. But it's more grain-growing than wine-growing, because its soil isn't suitable for grapes. This is relevant, by the way. I'm not part of the Autun Tourist Board. At the time we were talking about, it was also a centre of learning and commerce, so it's not some little backwater.
Okay.
And it was also the centre for pilgrimage due to a misunderstanding.
Jeez. That's a great reason for a pilgrimage. It's a misunderstanding.
The bishop was in search of relics to put Autun on the map.
Okay.
And he bought what he thought were the bones of Lazarus, the one that Jesus raised from the dead.
Okay.
But in fact, they were the bones of St. Lazarus of Aix. And that's A-I-X, not, in Victorian novels you get place names that just say X.
I thought it was A. I didn't realise it was X.
But either pilgrims were misled or confused because they continued to pour into Autun and worship them. And the cathedral was built to accommodate all these pilgrims, and it was called St. Lazarus, rather ambiguously.
If there is a heaven, I wonder if those people, after they died, said, "You denied me! It's all your fault that I'm still in purgatory! That man needs to go to hell!"
You told me it was the other Lazarus.
Yes.
It makes a difference, you know.
Yeah, this guy had absolutely no pull.
Outside of Aix.
Outside of X.
The Dukes of Burgundy used this cathedral as a family chapel. But, as we heard over on Patreon just recently,
Tudoriferous Patreon, covered in thick, creamy milk chocolate.
since Charles the Bold left no sons, only a wolf-devoured body, Louis XI took over the area, and Autun was in France at the time of the events we will eventually get to. Bartholemew Chasseneuz studied law at the University of Dole, then Poitiers and then Pavia, where he arrived just as Louis XII took Milan from Ludovico Sforza.
Okay.
He received his doctorate in 1502 and then disaster struck when he had to flee the plague and left all his books behind.
Oh, I know. The books come too.
Plague-ridden books.
Don't leave your books behind. Those are expensive.
Yeah. The fact he studied in Italy put him in good stead for practicing law in France. They were very impressed with Italian lawyers.
Okay.
In 1521, he gave a lecture on law before King Francis I, who was so impressed he made him a court legal advisor, and he was also made chief judge in the court of Provençal. And as we know, as we heard in the excellent episodes on Louis XI in Patreon,
Tudoriferous Patreon, hot and spicy.
France was in turmoil. The 100 Years' War had exacted a toll, not just on those who had to fight, but those who had to pay for it. The nobles were squeezing every last penny out of the peasants. And the nobles were entities in themselves, either using the king as a puppet, like Charles VII, or rising up against him, like Louis XI.
Yes.
And there were enclosures taking common land from small farmers. And this was still the case in the early 16th century. So the peasants were living on the edge. The slightest thing could push them over into penury.
Yeah, don't live there. So far, we haven't found a place I want to live.
So what was Chasseneuz's most famous trial? Well, it happened in 1522 or thereabouts. The ecclesiastical court convened in Autun, and the charges were read out, and a summons was issued to the defendants, warning them that if they didn't turn up, they'd be charged in absentia.
Okay.
Come the day of the trial, there was no sign of the defendants. And that was a dangerous choice to make, because you could end up with the worst punishment.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't get their story heard.
Now you're executed instead of just fined.
In fact, as far as the court was concerned, the guilt of the defendants was a foregone conclusion. They were preparing to convict and pass sentence. But then Bartholemew Chasseneuz stood up. He pointed out that the defendants lived over a large area of the province. Maybe they hadn't heard the decree telling them to come to court. They should be given more time to comply.
Okay. I like him so far.
The court agreed, although I should imagine reluctantly, since they were all ready to convict. So the decree was read out in every pulpit in the area. So as long as they attended church, there was no way they could claim to be unaware of the summons. At the end of the set time, the court convened again. And again the defendants hadn't turned up. Well, they'd had their chance. The judges were prepared to convict and pass judgment. But then up stood Bartholemew Chasseneuz. They must have thought, oh, God, there he goes again. Could the defendants honestly be expected to come to court when they'd have to cross hostile territory to do so? Surely the only fair thing would be to offer them safe conduct with an armed escort. Well, at this point, either the ecclesiastical court acquitted the defendants or they gave up. You know, OK, Monsieur Chasseneuz, you win. Now, you think that if the judges were so keen to get the defendants to court, well, surely it wouldn't be that much effort to provide an armed guard to get them there safely. But by this time, the court must have seen the ridiculous of the situation. How could an armed guard keep back the defendant's sworn enemy, cats, and allow the defendants, rats, to get to court?
Oh, my goodness. They are trying animals.
They're trying rats on this occasion. Yeah.
What the heck?
It's not the first animal trial that happened in Autun.
No.
In 1488, there'd been a trial of slugs.
What? Oh my.
But these rats were indicted on a charge of having feloniously eaten up and wantonly destroyed the barley crop. And as I said, you know, the peasants were living on such a precarious lifestyle.
Yeah, so spend the money on the court on something to actually keep them living. You know, food. Don't...
Chasseneuz's defence of the rats set a precedent that was used in later trials, even in a court with Chasseneuz himself. He was a judge in the court where they were to hear a case against a group of alleged heretics.
Oh, actual people this time? Or are they slugs?
People, yes. Their defence lawyer said that they had not been given adequate time to answer the summons. So I will direct your honour to the case of the French court versus the rats of Autun.
Jeez.
Chasseneuz agreed, and in fact the suppression of the heretics was postponed until after his death, which implies that he thought trying heretics was even as daft as trying rats, I think. There were many trials of animals at this time, and they fell into two categories. domestic animals where the crime was specific and wild animals where the crime was more generalised. Domestic animals, for instance, the famous example in Marseille when a pig ate a baby. So trying domestic animals was problematical, though. Was the accused a criminal or a valuable piece of property? If a mule driver was knocked over and trampled by his mule, should the mule be tried as a criminal? If it was, and if it was executed, the family's just lost its breadwinner and its mule.
This is a dumb question. This is dumb.
So generally, only when the domestic animal accused belonged to a neighbour would the full force of the law be used.
Oh,
And even
jeez.
then, rarely. And what would happen if someone were trampled by a herd of cattle? Who was to say which did the actual trampling that killed them? They might charge an innocent cow that was just going about its business, not trampling anyone. It was a legal minefield.
Yeah, it's stupid. Just stop.
The other category, the one our rats come into, was wild animals. But what punishment could you inflict on locusts or weevils or rats? Excommunication wouldn't do because they didn't attend church services or bury their dead anyway. It wasn't going to worry them. Instead, ecclesiastical courts might anathematise the accused.
Oh, my God.
Effectively cursing them, although obviously that wasn't the word they used.
And Catholics don't believe that animals go to heaven. So how is this doing anything?
Well, the idea was that the rats wouldn't have stolen the barley because they were rats and rats eat barley. There were dark forces behind it.
Oh, my God.
There had to be. So effectively, they weren't trying the rats, they were trying the dark forces behind the rats. So by anathematising, I suppose in a way, you're exorcising the rats.
You know, everybody, we try to say they weren't credulous, they weren't stupid, but this is ridiculous.
There was a lot of it about.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah. I know there's in Hartlepool, which I think is on the East Coast, I think they still use an emblem of a monkey as part of their sort of logo because there was a monkey hanged for something in Hartlepool. I have to ask a friend of mine, Ali, who does our voiceover. She comes from Hartlepool. She was telling me about the hanging of the monkey of Hartlepool. Editing Lucy here. The story of the monkey of Hartlepool is even sadder than I remembered. It happened during the Napoleonic Wars, and a French ship was wrecked in a storm off the coast of Hartlepool, and the only survivor was a monkey dressed in a French army uniform. When the good folk of Hartlepool found this monkey on the beach, they'd never seen a monkey before, and they'd never seen a Frenchman, so they assumed he was a French soldier. They tried him as a spy, found him guilty, and hanged him then and there on the beach. There is now a monument on Hartlepool Beach showing this poor monkey. Now, I mentioned there were doubts about this story. And part of this is we hear the story from a source from 1906 by Edward Payson Evans. But although he told us where he got his facts from, we can't really be sure about those sources. Because one source was allegedly by Chasseneuz himself. However, when we look at his writing, especially those in which he says that animal trials are perfectly valid, he doesn't mention this particular case, and you'd think he would if this was his most notorious case.
Yes.
And when he said they were valid, he means that they were written into law, not that they were a sensible way to spend your time.
Okay.
He's just saying, they're in the law, we've got to live with it. There's also a source written in the 19th century by Edmé Théodore Bourg. He quotes the speech given by Chasseneuz at the trial. Quote, "Was there anything more unjust than these general prescriptions which strike families en masse, which punish the child for its parent's crime, which attack without distinction those who, because of their youth or senility, are incapable of the crimes," unquote. So, it's quite easy to forget. He is actually talking about rats here.
They're animals.
So Borg was telling a story. It was for a popular market. So, a stirring speech made in court. I mean, people still like that. And we know they did make up speeches, so...
Yep. All the time.
Perfectly acceptable, yeah. Evans, the man who wrote the story in 1906, was a great advocate of animal rights. So, good man. He may have felt or been trying to convey cruelty to animals as a throwback to barbaric times.
Good.
If you're cruel to animals, you're no more advanced than they were.
Except you're cruel to animals right now.
Yeah. But it has also been suggested that the story might have been made up much earlier for the purpose of discrediting Chasseneuz, the crazy man who defends rats. And not just rats, diabolic rats.
The crazy man. What about the crazy man who tries the rats?
I don't know who had been trying to discredit him or why. But that was put forward. Animal prosecutions began to fizzle out in the 18th century, which was a good deal later than I was expecting. So that was a tiny slice in the life of Bartholemew Chasseneuz.
That was ridiculous. That should have been an April Fool's
Well,
episode.
it would be if it weren't true. So that was short.
That was short.
There you go.
And nonsensical.
But good for him. Good for him for standing up for the rats. I think that every priest in the Autun area had to stand up on Sunday and announce, if there are any rats listening, you've got to turn up in court.
You've got to go to... Oh, my gosh.
There's a lot of people drawn into this.
Flabbergasted.
Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.